Okay, let's jump right into this explainer. Have you ever actually stopped to wonder what exactly makes us buy what we buy? I mean, really think about it. Well, today, we're going to treat the whole economy like this giant, fascinating control board. We are going to discover the exact levers that get pulled, sometimes consciously, sometimes completely unconsciously, every single time we make a purchase. Here is our syllabus for today's masterclass. We'll start with the basics, then we'll do an income chart deep dive, and finally, we'll connect it all to the wider market. All right, section 1, the basics, and our core economic concepts. Let's start with the absolute most obvious lever on our control board, the price tag, and your willingness to actually pay it. You see, when we're talking about demand in economics, we're really talking about an effective desire. And what that means is you want something, and you actually have the money in your pocket to buy it. So the really crucial point here is understanding this fundamental seesaw effect known as price demand. It's an inverse relationship. When the price of a commodity falls, the quantity that people demand goes up. And conversely, if that price shoots up, well, demand falls right back down. It genuinely acts just like a physical weight on a seesaw. A massive price drop heavily tips the scales, right? And that lifts up the quantity demanded basket. It's the absolute core determinant of demand. But, and this is a big but, remember that this inverse relationship assumes all other factors stay constant. And let's be real, in the real world, there are massive, massive factors at play way beyond just the price tag. For example, consumer tastes and preferences act as an instant lever. We don't just buy things simply because they're cheap. We buy what's in fashion. We buy what fits our lifestyle. Just think about how quickly a sudden physical fitness craze can violently spike the demand for gym memberships, or how people will just readily abandon perfectly good, cheaper, old-fashioned goods for much costlier modern ones simply because the trends shifted. Moving on to section 2, the income chart deep dive. Let's talk about money and shopping. Okay, let's slow things down for a second and decode exactly how the money in our pockets completely changes our shopping habits. Take a deep breath and look at this chart. Imagine your income climbing upward on the y-axis, while the quantity of stuff in your shopping cart gets fuller as we move to the right on the x-axis. We are going to look at 3 very distinct curves here, representing 3 completely different types of goods. First up, check out that straight, upward-sloping blue line labeled NG. That stands for normal goods. Honestly, this is the most straightforward relationship on the board. This curve just shows that when you get a bigger allowance or a raise at work, you naturally just buy more of these standard items. If you have more disposable income, your demand for, say, new clothes or maybe a fancy flat-screen TV directly increases. More money, more stuff. Makes perfect sense, right? But now, here is where it gets really interesting. Look at that backward bending curve for inferior goods. It moves up at first, sure, but once your income hits a specific threshold, it literally bends backward. Why on earth would you buy less of something when you have more money? Well, because once your income hits a certain point, you can finally afford to upgrade. You stop buying cheap maize or low-quality goods because you can finally afford superior substitutes, like high-quality wheats or rice. So your income went up, but your demand for the inferior good actually dropped. And finally, we've got inexpensive necessities. Notice how demand increases at first, but then it completely turns into a rigid, straight, vertical line. This represents basic household staples. Think salt, sugar, matchboxes. Because think about it, no matter how rich you get, even if you literally become a billionaire tomorrow, you aren't going to suddenly start hoarding giant piles of salt in your mansion. Your demand hits a cap, and it just remains completely constant no matter how much your income keeps climbing. All right, section 3, connecting to the market, focusing on society and products. Let's speed the pace back up a bit and zoom out. Our levers are also being pulled by what economists call the cross-price effect. This is where the price of one item directly yanks the lever of a completely different item. Because we don't buy things in a vacuum, right? Goods are often deeply, deeply related to one another. You can basically think of this in 2 main buckets, substitutes and complements. Substitute goods are competitive. Think coffee and tea. There's a direct relationship here. If the price of coffee suddenly shoots through the roof, what happens? Your demand for tea rises because you just swap over to the relatively cheaper option. But complementary goods, they are stuck together to satisfy a single want, like cars and petrol. Here, the relationship is completely inverse. If the price of petrol skyrockets, it's not just your demand for petrol that drops, your demand for cars falls too, because suddenly driving just became way too expensive. And to wrap this all up, our buying levers get pulled by a whole host of outside factors. If we expect prices to rise in the future, we rush out to buy more today. If banks start offering easy credit loans, suddenly the demand for houses and cars goes up. Even demographic shifts pull the lever. More teenagers in a city means a suddenly higher demand for jeans. Even the weather plays a part. A blazing hot summer obviously spikes demand for air conditioners. But I've got to say, my absolute favorite is the demonstration effect. That's just an economist's fancy way of saying social copycat buying. It's that deeply human tendency to emulate our friends. You know, buying that super expensive smartphone or luxury car simply because the people around us got one first. So, we've explored the entire control board of demand, from the basic seesaw of price to the wild backward bending curves of income. Now I want to leave you with a bit of a challenge. I want you to look at your own world exactly like an economist. Look around the room you're sitting in right now. What specific levers were pulled to get all that stuff into your life? Can you spot one item you bought purely because the price dropped? And what about that demonstration effect? Is there an item sitting right next to you that you bought just because someone else had it first? Really think about it.